Everyone. This is Debra Rue, and you are watching AXSChat. I have Antonio Santos joining me, and Neil decided he needed to go on a vacation. So he's in Thailand with his beautiful wife for a few weeks, and so he's joining us, I'm sure, in spirit. Today, we are bringing back a guest that we've had on before. We love her. We think she's amazing, and she has a new book. So Frances West, who owns her own strategic company, and she helps corporations all over the world bring accessibility and disability inclusion as part of their strategic advantages. And she is formerly the Chief Accessibility Officer for IBM, the first woman to ever become a Chief Accessibility Officer. Yay. So welcome to the program, Frances. It's very nice to have you back on the program.
Well, thank you. Thank you for this is like I won't say like Saturday Night Live, but I feel very privileged to be back on this show. And every time I come back, the audience just grow bigger and bigger. So thank you.
It's 4 years. We had our birthday in November, 4 years of doing this. So it's very exciting. So we're really thrilled to have you back on. So Frances, tell us, for those that might not know you, I gave a real brief one, but give us a little bit more of a background of who you are, and then tell us the name of your book and a little bit more about your book. But first of all, tell us about you.
Okay, sure. Frances West, and now I'm the founder of FrancesWestCo. Like you mentioned, is a global strategy advisory company, and I work with public and private, and also a startup. Really, if I have to net it out, it's really how to operationalize inclusion in the technology area. And this is really a not just a passion, but a conviction that I kind of gained as I was IBM's Chief Accessibility Officer. And because I feel like this is a topic that involves all human race, as you know, and it's a global topic, it's a societal topic, and especially we're at the intersection of technology and human. And there's so much advancement that's been, developed in the whole technology area that we need to really make sure that human come first. So this has been my kind of a focus since my retirement from IBM 2.5 years ago.
Which is exciting. And so I know that Antonio has a question, but we want to make sure that you tell us the name of your book. And then, Antonio, I'm handing the mic to you.
Okay. So the book actually is named Authentic Inclusion Drives Disruptive Innovation. It's a book about my personal and professional journey. And the focus, like I mentioned earlier, is really hoping to change the, especially the senior decision makers, understanding the inclusion is actually the source of disruptive innovation.
Frances, I think that I follow you on Twitter and we connect on LinkedIn. I think that you have been traveling around the world. You have been attending numerous numbers of events as well, talking with a lot of people. Since the last time that we had your first interview with us on AXSChat, a lot of things have changed. But what I'd like to know from you is, from reaching out all those groups of individuals in different countries, what changes are you observing in this space of accessibility and inclusion, not only in large companies, but also in medium-sized and startups?
Well, I think there's absolutely a rising awareness, and someone is good work by people like yourself and Debra, through the, kind of focusing on the branding, and so there is a general, definitely awareness of how inclusion is a topic. I think the whole inclusion kind of movement got some extra focus because some of the latest events, both here locally here in the U.S., like the Me Too movement, So everybody has the general awareness. And then on the technology side, I think the artificial intelligence or AI, the debate about conscious and unconscious bias in AI, I think again kind of dial up the general awareness. So those are actually very good developments. And by the way, this is across the board, right? Because I was just in China in March, and they're actually not just thinking, they're actually actioning in accessibility area. That said, I do think that the whole inclusion kind of discussion sometimes still very siloed, right? By gender, by race, or by religion. And in many cases, the area that you and I and Debra and Neil and all of us care a lot about, disability, which we know that really cut across every kind of diversity group. In a way, actually, sometimes it gets actually pushed down, quote unquote, in terms of the recognition. So this is actually one of the driver of me writing this book is to change that dynamics.
And you mentioned that we are talking with a lot of executives. We know that some people are trying to bring these topics to the World Economic Forum, as in order to have executives and boardrooms committed with more accessibility, disability, and inclusion. Do you see that is something that will happen, or it's something that we still need to work a lot in order to make it a reality, and also trying to bring more of the probably some of the media to this type of conversation, because sometimes they seem a little bit off of it?
I mean, this is I always felt like the disability topic or accessibility, now we're talking about specific, probably more technology-based topic. This is actually a very complex topic, right? This is, on one hand, you have you talk about humans, so a lot of the historic or traditional approach of even, especially with the business, understanding this topic is more from the charity and philanthropy side, right? And then you got some very hardcore, for example, technology practices that one has to have through standards, and that's the W3C, the WCAG 2.0, that gets very, very technical. So you kind of got this two extreme of one is what I call the hard share, one is a mind share that you kind of have to capture before that executive can really understand organically, right, and then take the right action. So I think it's one of those topics that you really have to have a more holistic and what I call the blueprint approach, so that even if the executive get it in that moment, whether it's World Economic Forum or other events, they are able to come back and do something with it. And then the do something part, I think it's sometimes could still, need some focus and work, because we have a lot of work that pushing up, right? So we will do the ROI analysis, we will do kind of use cases, but there's no kind of a top-down awareness or adoption. And that's why, at least for my own experience working in company like IBM, and also with some of our clients, as you probably know, when that we did a lot of work with a big, whether it's financial services or retail customers in this area, what I found is that you got to kind of tie this topic to where the business executive decision makers' mind is at, and there, I would say almost all, if of them are focusing on how can they innovate to differentiate, and yet. For me, the epiphany when I started taking over or working in this area was that the people with disability is the ultimate innovator, right? Because they have to be so creative. So that element, I felt like it needs to be really highlighted. So again, coming back to the book, that's why the title of the book is Authentic Inclusion Drives Disruptive Innovation. And the key word is really on innovation.
I agree. And what we've seen is we see activities. I know that Caroline Casey, a Valuable, is going to bring CEOs to talk about these topics at the World Economic Forum. She's successfully done that. And there's a lot of activities going on, but there's still so much to do. And we still see executives. We had Rob Newhouser from Siemens, which is an executive over there. Antonio has been working with Siemens very closely, and they were talking about unconscious bias, and it's fascinating talking about unconscious bias and something that we really need to understand, because once again, now we're going to start coding and programming artificial intelligence. So if we're bringing our unconscious bias into that, we're going to continue to have a very inaccessible world. And I think also, Frances, a comment that you made about people with disabilities are often innovative because you have to be innovative when the world is not made for you. And so you have to be innovative whether you're blind or you're deaf, or maybe you have a mental health issue that you're struggling with. I know I struggle with depression. It's much worse in the winter time, even though I love the winter time. It's much worse. So there's steps I have to take to try to stay mentally healthy. And then, of course, life's throwing all the stuff at you on top. So it's like, I got it managed as long as my life is perfect, which never seems to happen. So I do see more people talking about it. Of course, we're talking about it a lot on AXSChat, but you were in such a unique position at IBM, when trying to help IBM understand it. And IBM, I think, has done so much in this space. And I think one thing you were successfully able to do at IBM was really help them understand that this is such a bigger topic than just saying disability inclusion. It is about innovation. It's about the new technology. How is Watson going to help the world make sure that we can all be our best at work, regardless of what's going on in our life? I mean, there's so many interesting technologies that are happening, but certainly we need to get the attention of the executives and the boardroom members. But I like, at the same time, then you're also working with startups that are trying to bring innovation to the world. So it's an interesting balance. And so how do we bring these converging worlds together to make sure that the people that need to understand this are having the right conversations?
Yeah, I think one of the things, especially if we're talking about business, especially in startup, we got to meet them where they are, right? So this whole really emphasizing the innovation aspect of anybody with different abilities I think is absolutely key. And another thing is, I've been, hearing a lot of good work being done in the ROI side, like return on investment and this and that. And then I started thinking, again, for business, what they want to do is they want to spend least amount of money, cost of product, right, and have the highest return. That's how you make profit, right? So I've been thinking a lot about how do you make sure that, again, we don't start put this inclusion topic in the quote unquote the hard share, the humans, the philanthropy or the charity side, and make it relevant as a business kind of a thinking. And what I realized, by the way, I think this is kind of mentioned in my book, is almost like a self-discovery journey. What I realized is that what people with disability constituency brought out the best use case for us to understand how we actually need to work with each other, and how do we actually process the different abilities as the secret sauce of making a company or institution special, right? So there is this whole idea that it's about respecting the different human differences. Fundamentally, it's just people with disability gave us an incredible opportunity to look at more of the the kind of extreme cases. But fundamentally, if a company, if an institution is authentic about inclusion, then it's about women, it's about person with different religion, it's women like immigrants, right? I myself as an immigrant, with all the discussion about immigration, that also kind of came into my consciousness, and that's why I'm hoping that by really changing the thinking, that we're not talking about one segment, right? We're talking about respecting everybody's differences, and not just celebrate that, but capitalize that to create the innovation. That is what I call the true authentic inclusion.
Right. I agree.
And the startup, interestingly enough, they actually get this message, maybe because age difference, I don't know, but I think the younger generation, I have a lot of hope for the younger generation. They seems to be a lot more with it in terms of just organically wanting to include everybody. So it's been a fascinating kind of a journey and learning on my part, working with the startups.
Yeah, and I agree. I have a lot of faith in the younger generation too. I still think that, the baby boomers, my generation, we're not done yet, but I think that we can do a much better job of working with the other generations to make the world a better place, which is why I think the work you're doing is so important. Antonio, did you want to make a comment?
I've been organizing an hackathon in Dublin in the last 2 years, focused on this topic. And what usually, talking about young generations, what usually happened to us is during that event, we have, a group of people from all the ages. But what we find interesting is a lot of the young developers who just came out of university, they are trying to, make a difference. And when they realize, wow, I didn't know that when I'm developing an app, I could make the app accessible. So, and then suddenly, when they realize all the potential behind what they can build in order to make it better and inclusive, things just work well, and they end up developing and trying to learn more about how to develop code that works for individuals with disabilities, who I found interesting because they realize that, oh, I didn't learn about this, but I can try to learn by myself and build it in this way.
Right, they get very enthusiastic, and this is going back to, and that's why we still need a lot of work. And I think Debra, and you guys both through your work on branding and AXSChat, this kind of outreach, a lot of time what we found is that both the programmers or developers or the business decision maker, they don't know what they don't know, right? They really have some of the kind of historic or traditional understanding of this topic, and then they carry forward, and they didn't realize that the technology can enable a lot of the or dissolve some of the gaps in terms of abilities or augment the abilities. So I think more awareness needs to be provided, but at the same time, I think we're at the point where we can assume that the awareness, if they don't know, they will pick up very quickly because there's a lot of information out there. But then on the other hand, they need to really have a blueprint to go forward.
Frances, I think that we have lost your video. We can still hear you, but I don't know if you accidentally turned your video. There she is. Hello.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't tell if it was me because but we can still hear you. So good. There's your beautiful face.
Okay.
Back. So, but very good points that you were bringing up. And I think one thing that we've really discovered as we've gone on this journey with AXSChat is I think we did not expect that we would be here 4 years later, continuing to have these really rich conversations, because accessibility and disability inclusion, we're not going to just solve it and then we're done. Humanity is evolving and changing, and technology hopefully is evolving and changing with us. And even though times can be really tough right now, I still am very optimistic about the future, especially as more and more executives continue to join these conversations. And I've heard you speak all over the world, Frances, and you always do a fabulous job. And I think you play a very important role in our industry because you have actually been charged of taking somebody like Big Blue, IBM, and blending this into the DNA of who IBM is. And that's that, it's so easy sometimes now you're a consultant, as a consultant, it's like, oh yeah, just do this. But the reality is, boy, there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of moving pieces. And so it's really gratifying to see the corporate brands that are stepping into the conversations. Siemens having these really rich conversations, SAP, IBM, Microsoft, Atos, it's really exciting, but it still does feel like we're just scratching the surface. We have some really innovators going in. We know that by including diverse workforce, it improves the innovation and the creativeness, and thus adding value to the bottom line. But it still does feel like we're just beginning. I mean, you have organizations like the International Labor Organization's Global Business Disability Network helping, and the Business Disability Forum, and Disability IN in the United States. There's a lot of efforts being made, but it still does feel like we're just scratching the surface. So how do we really get the executives, the decision makers, the board members involved? Go ahead, Antonio.
But let me make a comment. Sometimes people say, large enterprises are not innovative or something like that, and that's not true. Because going back, you just quoted two examples. IBM was the first company to recognize the importance of accessibility at the enterprise. Siemens was one of the first companies in the world a decade ago to appoint a chief diversity officer when nobody was talking about it.
Right.
And today we see a lot of people talking about this topic, but it's important to realize that some of the innovators came from the enterprise.
Right.
And sometimes they don't really get the credit that they actually deserve.
I agree. We like to beat them up instead, when actually they have really started changing the world. It takes a lot to change the world. Go ahead, Frances.
Well, I mean, you mentioned that 4 years. I think you're going to be here 40 years from now, right? I mean, if you look at the topic that we have talked about 4 years ago, frankly, it was pretty discussion about web accessibility. Now we're talking about artificial intelligence. We're talking about, content. We're talking about creativity. I mean, we're talking about topics that I don't think 4 years ago, none of us could anticipate. And like you mentioned, this is a human topic. So, I kind of hashtag human first, right? If we truly, again, going back to the word authentic, many people are talking about inclusion, especially executives. It's fashionable, right, to talk about inclusion. It's politically incorrect not to talk about inclusion. But are you truly authentic? And so the question I put out, why I use the adjective authentic, is that if you're truly authentic, then you need to put your money where your mouth is, right? You need to invest, you need to study, you need to understand. And in this case, people with disability or aging populations or people who are non-English speaking, with any kind of different ability will need certain technology I don't like the word accommodation. I really need, I think, the technology companionship, right, to make the productivity better. So that's why I'm trying to put out a bit of a change in challenging the thinking, is that are you investing in your talent, but at the same time your technology, right? Or what I call the T plus T. Because we know that technology is underpinning everything we do, how we learn, how do we live, how we play, how we work. If that's a given, then how can you, and then you say talent is the most important resources of any institution, then how can you not think about technology? So by definition, that's why I made the point that, and you heard me said that before, that accessibility has to be viewed as foundational as privacy and security, because all the technology nowadays is a personal technology or personalization technology. It's about individual, it's about human. And then if you care about human as your customer, as your employee, then you must, by definition, care about the technology investment or innovation, right? I mean, in this case. And then you're right, Antonio, the large companies, I always, think about how do we scale and how do we sustain? Because that's two things, enterprise live on, right? You don't just celebrate on the one-off. We actually put a lot of effort, always thinking, is this just one flying object that looks good, but it will fly by? But how can you ground it? That's why operationalizing inclusion and through things like accessibility, competency, to me is at least one way that I know, it can provide the sustainability and scalability.
So you mentioned topics like security and others, and over the last couple of years, I've been having a long debate, especially in the EU, about GDPR. But at the same time, we have a similar debate about the European Accessibility Act, and you really realize that all the effort made on the side of security, and you're not able to observe the same commitment on the side of accessibility and inclusion. And just a few days ago, we saw a drop in number of employment of people with disability in Portugal in the last 4 years, about numbers more than 20% drop in terms of employment. I think I would really like to see the same commitment, especially in Europe, that they have put on GDPR, on making services more inclusive, and on the European Accessibility Act. I would like to see at least the same level of effort in order to that they have put with GDPR. It's not yet there, but I have my hopes that it will happen.
Well, I actually feel that because GDPR created such a controversy, right, and frankly put a lot of spotlight on some of the U.S. companies, what I call the consumer technology companies, that the data privacy is so important. I'm actually hopeful that that's why the drumbeat, through like AXSChat and through the work that you all do, and then we all do collectively, to make the point that the accessibility is an infrastructure topic, and that hopefully that these big technology companies and small startup, as they innovate, then they will have GDPR as a kind of lesson learned. Is like, you think you can get away with it a bit, but it's going to catch up, and when it caught up, it's going to be a big problem. So hopefully the learning curve on the accessibility side is not going to be as long, and maybe they will, I think, actually offer an opportunity for them to be proactive, because now we can use GDPR to say, listen, it's the same path. It's your choice, right? Whether you're going to pay now or you pay later. Does that make sense?
That's so true. It does. And that's a very good point. Do you pay now or do you pay later? And also, what are you missing out? What innovation? If you're looking at this from really the lens of any size business, but let's just look at it from big business. If you're not being innovative, if you're not thinking about having the most innovative, productive, creative employees, if you want to be the employer of choice, all those things that, of course, the corporations want to do. But if you're not considering all these moving parts and inclusion and how unconscious bias fits into it, and the privacy and data, your competitors are. And so you are going to you're going to lose competitive advantage. And the young people, going back to the young people, they have made it clear. They do not feel that the company that they work for owns them. I know that in my parents' generation, my parents both worked and retired from AT&T, and boy, and I'm an AT&T brat, as they say, not a military brat, but even though my family was in the military as well, but they were so loyal to AT&T till the day my mother and father passed. My mother would not consider any other provider but AT&T, and AT&T is pretty darn good, so we love AT&T. But they bled and lived and really were so loyal. And it's not that the younger generation isn't loyal to their employers, they are, but they're almost taking a more balanced approach than maybe my parents' generation did. So they will walk out on you. They will get on social media if you're doing something, if you're sexual abuse is happening and it's not being addressed by the senior team. It's just real. I think the world's going to be a better place with these. The way the younger people are thinking about it. It almost feels a little bit more balanced. So if the executives are not taking the time to make these things a priority, make sure we're secure, we have privacy, access for all of your customers, the corporation loses. Don't you agree, Frances?
Oh, absolutely. And I know that you have been served on, he has that I for J, Innovation for Job, kind of I guess I call it think tank that
Right.
I've been a part of. And then one of the things I mean, you probably know that they just came out with a new book called the
Yes.
People-Centered Economy, which is kind of my way of thinking the human first is very much in parallel or in the same kind of vein of thought. That is, there's just no question that the world or the technology is going to become more and more personalized, right? So then you say it's going to be, we have to make a very conscious decision. Is are we going to be ruled by the robots or artificial intelligence or by human, right? So if we choose to still have human to be in charge, then we better do everything we can to enable the human differentiation. So from that standpoint, I think actually, I actually even think that the whole power differential between corporation and individual will begin to balance out, because I think a gig economy will push us, because just like you said, the young generation, they will pick and choose who they want to work for, not the other way around anymore, right? So I think over time, just by pure economics, we're going to see a totally different balance of power, which is yet another reason that any company should think about making their infrastructure, making their, their organization human first or human centered, which actually tied to a organization transformation thinking, which, again, in my book, I kind of gave a high level kind of a suggestion as to how to think about this, right? So it's not just about HR, it's about the CIO, it's about CMO, it's about, all 360 degrees. Because that's when you talk about human, like you said, human is messy, right? Human is all encompassing. So you cannot take this topic like a digital project, binary, yes or no, just calculate your way out of it.
Well, and I agree. Go ahead.
But I was just going to say, but it's exciting at the same time. It's complex, but then if you do it right, the as we all know on the phone, I mean, the return or the satisfaction is because you're doing something that's meaningful and impactful.
Right. And we're not going to be bored. That's for sure. So, so Frances, we really appreciate you being on today. We want to thank Barclays, who has sponsored us for years, and we love what Barclays does, and also MyClearText, which supports us to make sure we are accessible because we want to walk the walk. But Frances, before we totally close, how can people buy your book?
Okay, they can get to my website, www.franceswest.co, C-O, not .com, franceswest.co, and then there is a book tab, and you can click on it, and then there is Amazon and also Barnes & Noble direct link.
Great. And I'm looking forward to reading it and writing a review. Reviews on our books are so important, and it's so hard to get reviews on books. So please, I'm sure Frances would appreciate you buying her book, but please give a review too, because that really, really does help your ranking on Amazon and Barnes & Nobles as well. But Frances, thanks for being on the show. Thank you, Antonio. And I'm looking forward to chatting with you on Tuesday, which is my birthday. Yay. So
Yay.
I won't say what number
day.
it is. but it's
Yeah.
a big number. So yay.
Well, you're forever young and youthful.
That's right. That's right. So, but thank you so much, Frances, Antonio, and Neil. We missed you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Wow, thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye bye.